Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Olivier, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Anis Bennaceur, co-founder and CEO of Attention.com. Anis will be sharing insights about their next generational sales conversational platform that's actually revolutionizing customer interactions through AI. And we will explore how he got there, the ups and downs, and also a little bit more about his being a second-time founder. So gladly give you the floor, Anis, to introduce yourself.
Olivier, thanks so much for having me here. Very excited. And pleasure is all mine. Yeah, introducing myself. I'm Anis. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Attention. Attention.com is our website. Great domain name. And I have been the founder for the past decade now, second-time founder. I'll introduce my journey as I'll try to be as succinct as possible, and then feel free to open up questions around anything that you'd like. But yeah,
All right.
overall, I was very lucky. My parents always pushed me growing up to use technology back in the late 90s, early 2000s. My dad bought me my first computer at the time and discovered internet when I was 11 years old. And so I discovered the internet back then, and the first question that I had to myself was, how do I build websites, right? So I looked it up, found tutorials online, and learned how to write HTML using Notepad, and then discovered JavaScript, discovered Macromedia Flash, discovered all those great technologies, but also developing languages, right? And so taught all this myself growing up, then taught myself how to write code, program. And so that was kind of like one of the things that really got me into technology over the year. When I was 17 years old, moved out of London and went to France, went to one of the, what they call it, prépa, which is one of the top, schools after high school. And then went to one of the top schools in France and Europe, actually called ESCP. I started
Yeah.
mostly there. This was back in 2008. Tech is not as big in Europe as it was in the US. But when you went through these schools, the best thing to do after school was either strategy consulting or investment banking. And so that's kind of what I did, right? Investment banking. And the main thing that I learned out of it is, attention to detail, because you triple check everything that you do. You normalize 100-hour weeks and you just become a real grinder, right? It's just one of the best things that you could do actually to your professional career, which is become an actual human machine at work.
And this was in the States or?
Back in France. And then one day, a friend of mine comes to me and says, "Hey, look, there's this new app coming from the US. Founders live in LA. They are growing very quickly over there. They're looking for people to grow it in France." And I always knew that I wanted to be a founder in a way, because even growing up, I had a lot of little entrepreneurial gigs. And so anyway, he presents to me this app. I use it, and after 30 minutes, I was like, "This is incredible. I want to do this." And so I joined the startup, and that startup turned out to be Tinder, the dating app. They were about 6 months old, more or less. And I had an incredible experience. Not very technical, because it was all about going around campus and making sure that people signed up to the app. But yeah, that was
Amazing.
great. That got me back into kind of like the startup world in a way, even though Tinder was not a real startup. They were incubated by a studio that was owned by a hedge fund called IAC. But anyway, long story short, so
So
great.
you actually joined before they were called Tinder.
So no, they actually were called Tinder already.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and then basically that was great. That got me to think to myself after a year and a half or so, what I wanted to do next, and I felt like I was ready to be a founder. So I started, at the time it was a consumer app called Mixer, which was a professional network for creatives. And one thing that I knew how to do was launch consumer apps. So I did that for Mixer. It grew the user base quite quickly. We had some of the top creatives in the world. And over time, after, running it as co-founder and CEO, I we were generating revenue through user subscriptions, which was basically the only thing that I knew how to do. And over time, we started thinking, okay, now we gotta start generating revenue through B2B subscriptions. And we were having businesses ask us if they could post job listings on the platform to recruit some of these creatives. And that was something that was pretty eye-opening. So I had to learn what B2B SaaS was, brought in some salespeople, and just kind of like taught ourselves how to sell job listings on the platform as a B2B subscription. And that's where I was introduced to all the pains that I'm solving today with attention. And so fast forward to 2021, I meet a guy named Matthias Wickenberg, who was the CTO and co-founder of my biggest competitor, a startup called Swipecast. I met him in 2020. Despite being, arch nemesis, we had a lot of respect for one another. We heard great things about each other. Over time, as we kept having all these conversations, we realized that we wanted to start a next startup together. And so we wanted to solve some of the pains that we had in our prior lives. That's the first thing. The second thing is we wanted to go into a space that was really big because, Mixer was bootstrapped. We were never able to raise VC funding because it was too much of a niche and so on. And so we really wanted the next challenge that would allow us to grow something really big in a space that was also pretty big. And then I was always fascinated by growth and sales. I realized I didn't really want to build a business and growth because for many reasons, which we can talk about later, but I did think that sales was an incredible space and there was so much to innovate. We saw that, speaking to potential customers at the time, that they had a lot of pain points that were being unsolved. And so we went out and built Attention. So we launched the business in September 2021. We raised a seed round led by ENIAC Ventures in around May of 2022, announced it in 2023, started selling in February of 2023, a couple months after ChatGPT came out.
Yes.
Rode the wave, grew very quickly, grew in the second year again very quickly, raised a Series A, led by Alvin, top European VC. And then now we're scaling pretty aggressively. So what does Attention do? We automate work out of your customer conversations.
Right. Maybe we'll need to unpack that a little bit more. But yeah, amazing journey, definitely. So yeah, you're actually a second time founder, maybe already two times actually. But let's say that it's now the second time, but do you see it as like kind of the first time actually running like B2B SaaS, and like how different is it compared to what you're doing at Mixer? I mean, from the consumer base, I can imagine the go-to-market motion is completely different, but
Yeah, great question. So the way I like to describe it, it's like buying your first car and then buying your second car. You always buy a shitty
right.
car, the first one, you bump it around, you make all the mistakes, all the accidents, and then the second one, you're hopefully a way better driver. And so it's completely different in the sense that when we started Attention, we knew all the mistakes to avoid, all the types of people not to hire, right? I basically, after Mixer, basically, I wrote a blog, which is still on my website, on my personal blog, which is the 10 mistakes that I've learned out of Mixer and the things that I will never do again. Overall, I think it's how do you de-risk your next business, right? And there are so many things now that we have wired in our brains that that we know how to do. That being said, Mixer never got to the level where Attention is now. And so obviously now there's a lot of new learnings, right? Like how do you
Yeah.
define culture around the business? How do you make sure that you're not hiring the wrong people because one bad mistake can really contaminate, or one wrong hire can really contaminate the rest of the team? How do you make sure that people are always motivated? How are people growing? How are people, how do you enable your team to all be drivers, right? And so there's an element of obviously hiring the right people, but also the other element is, giving them the power and the ability to really push the business further, right? Because as the business grows, I only end up becoming a smaller percentage of who we are, and and I don't end up not having as much control on things anymore.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
it's really, yeah, the short answer to your question is basically that Mixer, I was really doing everything that you could think of, right? From growth to sales to marketing. You're a bootstrap founder. B2C is a different game, right? It's all about growth hacking, understanding product analytics. You can't really talk to to as many of your users. You can talk to some consumers, but you're not going to have the same level of insight as you're getting from a B2B customer. And so it's really a different muscle. And just today, I'm very happy to be building in the B2B world.
Amazing. So you wouldn't necessarily go back to the B2C model. Okay, amazing. So you feel like you're more in control because you have like a more intimate relationship with your customers now.
Absolutely, right. All of our clients have shared Slack channels with us. And so we have the ability there to, at least be reactive if they ever ask for anything, but also, be proactive and reach out when, we have something that we want to ship for them or ship in general and get their thoughts, or, even like we would run kind of like product discovery questions around their,
Yeah.
we're going, and that allows us to be part of their team.
Yeah. Yeah. I still remember when we had our like discovery meeting through mutual connection. Like there was a huge difference because you're European. I've had my most experience with European SaaS and never really experienced great demos when I used to take one off out of US. So I was really impressed by your level of asking discovery or running a discovery call. Honestly, did you learn that at Mixer, like when you were going through that journey of teaching yourself, or?
So yeah, I brought in a head of sales who taught me some of this, right, to a certain level, right? Like asking the right, even like how you have a discovery call and just reducing um, your ratio of just speaking to listening, right?
Mhm.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing is just like digging into the pain and then coming up in a demo, presenting the solution to the pain, right? That's just a very, very simple step that if you have not been trained by a professional salesperson, a lot of, technical founders will come in and just present their solution without really
Mhm.
listening to the prospect. And then
Yeah.
obviously, like as we started attention, I had to, if we're selling a sales product to sales leaders that is supposed to help them be more productive and increase win rates, you have to be the best in sales, right? And so over the last 3 years, obviously, I've been very lucky to connect with some incredible sales leaders who have taught me so much, but also, building this product and even selling it has just taught us so much as well, right? So there's kind of like this learning by osmosis,
Yeah.
through osmosis across the team where we all learn from one another, come up with ideas, and even try to implement it into the product.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's amazing. So how did you stumble upon attention, right? And like also the name, I'm just curious. We don't need to take too long about it, but yeah, I'm really curious. Like, how did you go from you met Matt, you wanted to do something together, solve some of your own pain points. How did you start about like ideation from like going through the customer interviews and then actually having like an MVP first customers? How was your ride there?
Yeah. So, the name is an interesting one. Basically, I wrote a script that, um, pinged the GoDaddy API and would give me all the available dictionary words that, with the .com, right? So attention.com was available, yet very expensive. And then amongst like a dozen other words. And so with the white paper called Attention is All You Need on the Transformers, we thought that this was going to be a very sticky name within what we're doing. With all the play on words around, paying attention to your client, paying attention to your prospects, all these different things allowed us to really position the product really well, or the name really well around the product. So that's the first piece. The second piece around the user discovery was that before we even wrote a single line of code, we spoke to 30 plus heads of sales, and we were hearing a lot of different, pain points. So the very first product that we were going to build initially was something that could analyze your body language to tell you if someone was going to buy or not using AI. And the interesting piece was that we found a startup that was doing this. We signed up for the product. We tried to use it. We weren't very convinced. Then we tried to sell it to other people, claiming that it was our product and say, hey, look, would you buy this is our product, will you buy it? And very quickly we invalidated that idea because people were thought it was interesting, but no one really wanted it, right? And so that was like a great hack that allowed us not to have to build something that would have taken us months. Then the next piece was building real-time coaching, right? The real-time coaching piece was interesting. We built it, right? People were giving pretty positive feedback to the concept. We put it in the hands of design partners and they hated the product. The AEs could not stand having real-time battle cards coming on their screen and tell them what they should be saying. It was very distracting for them. So we went back to the drawing board, and our third idea, which we had in the backs of our heads, was that someone once told us, hey, well, our company will pay you a lot of money if you could fill medic in our Salesforce. And I was like, Tim, like, why didn't we even start with that?
Yeah.
And so we ignored that user comment because we were so set on the first two ideas. And that's, I think, a mistake that a lot of people do. So we went to that and we built it. We shipped it to users, a few weeks later. Like within 4 weeks, we stopped working on the real-time piece and went into the, filling CRM piece. And our users freaking loved it, right? They were like, oh, this is completely magical. And bear in mind, this was a month before ChatGPT came out. And so for
Right.
them, it was just completely mind blowing. Then, end of November 2022, ChatGPT comes out. The whole world is upside down around AI. And we're like, all right, now's our time. We gotta release the product, come out of beta, announce our seed round on TechCrunch, and just start to grow as fast as we can, right? We knew we had a beginning of a product market fit. We knew that wedge was probably not gonna last forever, that competitors were gonna build it, especially as we announced it. And so we announced that we were the first company that would fill your CRM based on what was being said in the conversation, fill, fields and properties in the CRM. And then, we grew extremely fast, but also we saw 3 to 6 months later, a bunch of competitors just, pivoting and trying to copy us, right? And I know that they did because we had a Loom recording on our website, and all the people who would see the Loom would be logged into their own Looms, and so we saw how often they would see.
Yeah, it's a smart hack as well. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I can imagine that. So yeah, maybe like to clarify, at what point did you get your like first customer, and how developed was the product there? Because we also didn't address the fact that you actually demoed another tool to validate it, whether people would buy it. So I absolutely love that. I think, even though maybe you didn't focus on the third idea, at least you still tried the other two and came to the conclusion that no one wants it, right? So yeah, really curious if you did then the same with attention, or you just like sold slides basically.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I gotta give credit to Matthias, my co-founder, who came up with the idea of selling someone else's product or trying to sell someone else's product to see like how people reacted to that. But that really saved us so much time.
Yeah.
I think we never try to sell a product without, having it built, at least at the beginning, because what's going to happen is that your prospects, they don't want to take political risk on an unproven product, right? And we don't want to have the friction of trying to navigate procurement process where, all you're trying to do is get feedback. So I know that really goes against the YC ethos of, hey, you gotta try to sell to validate customer demand. In our case, look, we just needed people to try to use it. And one of the other things, by the way, is that it did solve one of my big pain points, right? Which is, look, I was having a bunch of prospect conversations, right? My Salesforce was empty. This was a pain that I had even at Mixer, which was our Salesforce was always empty. And then also I had to send follow-up emails to those guys, right? After speaking to them. And I hated writing that manually. So I built the email generation piece for myself. And I was like, I'm sure if I find this useful, other people will find it useful. Or in real-time coaching, I didn't need it, right? I could not be my own user. So eventually, I think if you want to build something, you have to build something that you're going to use every day. And so this is still a guiding principle at Attention today, which is, look, we're building features now that we have a sales team, right, with 7 people, almost 9 soon. Is this a feature that we actually need internally? Because, we very much look like the customers that we're trying to sell. Okay, a lot of our clients are much, much, much bigger, 10 or 100x bigger than us. But still, the guiding principle is that, is this useful for us? Because if it is useful for us, it's going to be very likely that it's going to be useful for our clients. And so the process is we dog food it, we iterate on it, we release it for our, most forgiving customers who are going to be the people who love our product, who are okay with testing stuff, even if it breaks. And then once you get enough feedback and iteration, then you roll it out to the next set of customers and so on.
Right. So in the beginning, you got people to use it for free in exchange for feedback, and then you went from there, kind of while still like actively selling, I guess. And you said also you are your own buyer, but very interesting to learn how you went then from, let's say, being new into B2B sales to being able to define a buyer persona around that. Also, I mean, I know you're in New York, you're surrounded by tech salespeople. I guess you probably had a network already. So probably you started there. But then did you also explore non-tech? How did you experience different kind of traction? Or can you walk us through like the early days getting like the first 10, 20 customers and the playbook around?
We had zero network, right? I had a few friends
Okay.
who were angel investors. And I remember one of our first users basically was a company called Sparrow. Um, so the lead management startup. One of the LPs of one of our investors, and named Michael Manny, who's today the VP of Sales at Ramp, amazing guy, tells me, "Hey, look, I might have someone I can introduce you to." And so he introduces me to Sparrow. And Sparrow's like, "Hey, I'm down to try the real-time coaching piece." And they were the ones who really did not like that feature. And then, Jed Marl, who was the head of sales at Mailshake, who I kind of convinced to also set this up for his reps, right? And then I get another company called Rhombus Systems, a competitor of Verkada. That was one of our investors, Tim Lee, who connects us with their VP of, first with the founders and then the VP of sales. And so the first few ones, the design partners came from our network, or also me kind of like reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And so I was having great conversations with certain people, and things were going well. But very often, like mid to large size companies were very bearish, or did not just want to take any risk on us, obviously. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is we need to have SOC 2 Type 2 to be able to even get our product in the door, right? So that was like another challenge that we had, which we ended up getting, but that really delayed usage for our customers. So we had a handful of companies that were using us, which is a great start. But what really accelerated for us was the moment we came out of stealth, mid to end of January, I had a bot on LinkedIn that was adding my entire ICP, all the VPs of sales on LinkedIn.
With a message or without a message?
No message, just add them. Initially, we would message them, and then over time, I stopped the messaging because I had enough, design partners that we could iterate with. And so it kept adding people. And then when we came out of stealth, I made a LinkedIn post about our seed, $3 million seed that we announced on TechCrunch on LinkedIn. And that got a ton of visibility, right? And then we started getting a lot of companies coming in. And then I started posting about what AI could do to your sales, what AI could do to your top of funnel, and so that garnered a lot of impressions early 2022. And so I just grew our first, I would say 30 clients just through LinkedIn posting and inbound, right? Because we're still quite unproven. Outbounding was very difficult. I think, people who try to outbound without building a brand are going to have a ton of challenges growing their business. I really think that your first customers should be inbound, and you should be putting in all the efforts that you can to get people to come to you. Right. So you really should develop an outbound motion. A lot of people might disagree with me, but you should try to build an outbound motion after your 100, 150, 200 clients. When you're starting to build good reputation, you have a lot of, clients with high NPS willing to vouch for you in front of other prospects, and you can build your customer case studies.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I think it's easier and reply rates can be higher when you're like recognized. Yeah, so I do get it. We can have a whole different conversation about the other way as well, because many, if you're not even sure yet about like how to make the product or which audience it is for, where's the traction ongoing, or you have more of a horizontal SaaS that can, actually be used across different verticals, then, it's different kind of validation part. But yeah, here it's more of a, let's say, ideal path. And I do believe that the founder and content and brand in general will make it easier to launch businesses faster and validate them much faster as well. So I'm very curious, because you got like people contacting you because of those posts and because of the buzz around it, right? Like the fundraising, etc. Did you also reach out to people who engaged but didn't reach out, or was there no activity ongoing? Because at this point you have added these people already, which is, great. Then you post, and so that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. So no, because I was a founder solo selling, right? And I was getting like 12 calls a day every day. And so I closed their first 2 to 300K of ARR before hiring founding AEs. And so those are a lot of small clients, but still I would just get whoever, would come inbound. And that was already filling my entire top of funnel. I didn't really care that much about optimizing the sales funnel and the top of the growth funnel. All I cared about was closing deals, getting customer feedback, and making sure that we built a great product. And so really our first 300K of AR, they were not about growing revenue as fast as we could. They were all about getting customer validation, figuring out what to build next, getting, their comments on what we should be doing, right? And so it was really 4 to 6 very, very painful months where, my co-founder and I would look at each other, or like to him, like, how are we going to get through this? Like, yes, people would be like, we need this. By when can you have it? And we'll be like, 2 weeks. They'd be like, how about a week from now? And we'd be like, all right, fine. And we'd be like, my co-founder and John, our VP of engineering, would just be building like, and shipping like crazy, like night and day over the weekend to make sure that we had things out by that week. And so it was like a really big sport, but that's what really got us, through our early growth and our early um, tightening of product market fit.
Nice.
Obviously, we had some clients churning early on. They were like, "Hey, look, you guys are a little too early for us. Um, we we um, we may have to use something a little more advanced," but that was okay because that was part of the learning overall.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. So now you got like the first customers, the product is there, the product is good by now. How do you decide about building out outbound, going after the market proactively? How do you set it up? Is it you leading, or did you hire an agency, or did you hire those founding AEs and they had to do it? Yeah.
No, so one of the things is that I grew my last startup with outbound when we put in, a B2B mode. So I was quite good with automating outbound, and I was already, when I discovered GPT already, I was using that to draft my own icebreakers using AI. So I was extremely comfortable with that. But for me, not doing outbound at first was a deliberate decision because of how much faster inbound clients would close versus outbound, and you did not have to chase them as much. And so we really kind of started doing outbound, believe it or not, around the time we closed our Series A. Because every now and then we would outbound to some people who had extremely high intent signals. And so those people were the ones we would really sell to, but we didn't have any structured outbound motion. And so our outbound started right around the time we closed our A. So about, I would say, maybe 6 months ago now,
All
or
right.
8 months ago. Because at that point, some of the feedback that we were getting from investors, but also some of the things that we were feeling was that our ACVs were not high enough. And so even though they had been growing over the year, we still had relatively, low ACVs. And so how do we now go and purchase, and sell to the whales, right? And so at that point, we brought in Stu, our VP of growth, who came from Ramp, exceptional hire. And then we also brought in some BDRs too. So Stu and I worked on, building the outbound systems. And then the BDRs, we built also some intent signal systems as well that would push everything into some Slack channels, and the BDRs would kind of like use those signals to go out and manually outbound. And so really that was around the time we were doing maybe 1.5 million of ARR
Okay.
that we started to really consider outbound to grow.
Yeah, to double down on it. So, can you like break down the system a little bit on the signals? I'm very intrigued, being obviously an automation freak myself. Why you also decided to have them reach out manually and things like that?
Yeah. So I really believe in doing things that don't scale, right? I really think that you should be crafting your emails manually until you see success before scaling anything. And so for a while, when our sales reps or even BDRs would join, it would be like, all right, I need a Apollo, I need this. I'd be like, no. You're just going to write 100, your first 100 emails are going to be drafted manually. You're going to send the best possible emails to people. And then on the positive responses, we're going to see what worked and how you can scale that, right? So this is more on the composing side of things. On the signal side of things, so before even our B2B took off, I was using a tool called LeadPost. And LeadPost, you could send some of the website data, visitors data to some webhooks, and so I use that to push that into Clay, clean up the visitors, take only the ones that were VPs of sales or RevOps or CROs or so on. And where Clay was really helpful for me was that because on LinkedIn you don't have any uniformity of the titles. I would feed the title into ChatGPT and say, hey, is this one of these specific titles? If yes, give it a score of 3.
Right.
This, give it a score of 2. If it's that, give it a score of 1. So I would score titles. I would score also size of the company. Are they hiring anyone in those specific roles? How how was headcount growth and so on. And then basically based on that score, we would really ping the team when someone had a really high score. And so I went to, and then I showed this to Adam Robinson, the founder of RB2B, and I showed him what I was doing with lead posts. He's like, fuck, wait, this is incredible. Can you do that with RB2B and I'll give it to you for free for however long you want? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So he gives it to me for free. I build the exact same system as well with RB2B and then show it to the guys at Clay, right? And then the guys at Clay are like, this is really cool. And so the guys at Clay talked to Adam Robinson about this, and they're like, and he's from Attention showed us this. And I don't want to take credit, but I think I should get it.
I'm just discovering that I'm speaking to the man who is the actual creator of inbound led outbound.
And then literally what happened was they started working together and they're like, fuck, there's so much that we can do with this. And that really then took off in the next 6 months and everyone was talking about this. But I still probably have the recording on Attention of Adam Robinson being blown away by how I would connect, that and data, plug it into Clay and make it take off. I remember also speaking, showing this to G that works. I'm like, yeah, trust me, this is gonna be huge. And then 6 months later, he was like, oh yeah, you were totally right. Anyway, so we had also done that with Clearbit as well before they got acquired by HubSpot. So those are some of the third-party intent data signals that we built, and then obviously we added everything around job postings, champions moving companies. So there are a lot of signals that you can do there around that. Obviously, fundraising. I'm not gonna give it away too much, but we ended up also thinking a lot of what were the most relevant intent signals to what we're doing today at Attention. And those are generally the best ones because my thinking about growth is that if you're doing what everyone else is doing or what your competitors are doing, you're not necessarily going to be an outlier. You really have to figure out your own growth systems that no one else has.
Exactly, 100%. And so, knowing that you're so advanced, I don't mind to advanced as well. So something I've been thinking about lately, and it ties down to what you just said about standing out and like not doing what others are doing, right? So like also some of those data points that you mentioned, I think the magic in them is you tie them kind of all together and it's like a scoring system and it's not like, hey, congrats on your fundraising, here's attention.com, which should now be your next purchase and blah, 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 right? It will be more advanced. So it almost sounds like you're kind of tracking for a digital footprint of your buyers to kind of come to a very defined, very much data-driven hypothesis on now is a good time to reach out because this and this and this and this is true and not just this is true and now I'm going there with a hypothesis.
Yeah. I'm not going to give away too much because I know my competitors are going to be all over this. And also just in general, growth is about being ahead of the curve. So you do want to keep your tricks, but I mean, just to make it very simple, right? You see that a company is hired. You see that they hired a new VP of RevOps, and you see that there's a job posting about that requires people to know how to use Medic, as a framework. And then you see that also they require the reps to have experience with a certain tool. And that tool specifically, you're really good at winning against them or displacing them. Sorry, there's noise around with the... So anyway, in the email...
That's New York.
New York City, maybe. So you're going to you have to send a very thoughtful email around like, hey, congrats on joining the team. I know that you have hefty goals, given the raise that require your reps to know Medic, right? Or Medic. How can you ensure framework adoption across the reps? And at that point, you're coming with a POV that you scraped from a specific data, the job listing. That they had X amount of reps, that they have a new VP of RevOps. And this could sound like very, very basic to a lot of growth hackers out there, but You don't need to try to get incrementally more specific, or personalized to who you're reaching out to. All you have to do is be as relevant as you can and speak their language and show that you've done your homework, right? And so if you write that manually to one person, then you can walk it back and figure out a system that scales.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people miss that. And it's even something we do for most of our customers if they haven't run outbound before. We kind of do something what we call the manual experiment and kind of try to do what you just described. So that's awesome to actually see that play out so well, right? And so now maybe like in terms of revenue, where's like inbound versus outbound at? Because I noticed I mean, let's call it AI note takers or conversational intelligence, you join calls, right? So there's always a watermark, and I feel that fuels growth as well.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So from our experience, there's so much noise around that at this point, right? You see all these other PLG note takers that are having that watermark. And so users get desensitized to that, right? In my opinion. And so the best thing is, yeah, you have the watermark, but what's even better is having product market fit where your client will say, this product is the best that I've used in a while, right? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is you have to kind of like figure out other growth funnels. And it's not just like sharing an email with there's a lot more, I think, around even getting people to experience the aha moment or the wow effect around your product when they're sharing these calls, right? And so you have to do it in a smart way, but also because we're an expensive product with attention, we have to kind of be cautious of not them with these growth hacks, and we have to make sure that if you're selling a product to a CRO, the CRO of a big company, you don't necessarily want an automated email to go out to them with attention branded everywhere. So we have to be very tactful. I even heard once a client of ours say, at the last note taker that we used, there was a rep, talking ill of the prospect before they joined, and the automated email went out with a summary of what the person said about them, and that killed their deal. So yeah, you want to be extremely careful when it comes to specifically to sales of finding the right balance there.
Yeah, no, I get that. And yeah, I mean, maybe my other question to come back to that, like inbound, outbound in terms of like revenue, even though you only started 8 months, I guess you have quite quick deal cycles. So do you see like a profitable motion in that?
It's like I think it went from like 90% plus inbound to maybe now like 70% inbound.
Okay.
I would say yes, 70% inbound, 25% outbound, and the remaining 5% is partner led.
Are you gonna double down on working with creators as well? Obviously, coming from a background where you have and know how to get access to creators on scales.
So when you're saying creators, I assume it's like RevOps creators and like agencies, right?
It can be agencies or just people posting about attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've done that for quite a bit. We haven't done it that much lately. And that's because year one, we had to get our name out there and build a lot of innovative features. And then one of the pains that we had was that we were getting competitors, copying our features. And we knew it again through that Bloom hack. And that was extremely annoying. Year two, so 2024, we did not communicate about any new feature for the full year. We just kept communicating on the same ones. And we rolled out our newest features to our clients, right? Or sold them via demos and so on. And now what we're doing in 2025, we're going to announce all the stuff that we built last year, and we're going to go back to working with these content creators on LinkedIn to get the word out about some of the things that we built last year. but we're not going to announce anything with that we just released yet because we do want to have a full year, being ahead of the curve and outpacing competition before we announce anything.
Right, right. So basically, it's a chance for people to, if they want to see the behind the scenes, they'll need to get behind it by becoming a customer.
Yeah.
That's an awesome pitch. Anyway, so like I guess you don't want to shed too much of your light then on what you think is the future of what you're building in terms of the space you're in.
I definitely can say more actually. Look, I think that what we built last year, there were basically, I would say, two levels of innovation that we came up with. The first one was higher intelligence, right? So building, through agentic RAG, something that keeps improving over time, tied with the ability of getting larger context windows to assess, analyze thousands of conversations, and all of your deals as well, right? And so within attention, we can capture now the ability, the understanding of your entire deal, the risks, not just from calls, but also emails, and you can plug in all other data sources, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is workflows, right? So there's the insight layer, and then there's the workflow layer, which is what people are calling agents today, without really understanding what an agent is. And so we really spent a ton of time deeply understanding what agents are and what is the difference between an agent and a workflow. At the end of the day, the conclusion that we came up with was really simple. The agent is a self-evolving workflow where, the branches keep self-updating and evolving through better and better understanding and higher intelligence. And so we've released last year and releasing to the public now the ability of having a lot of sales related workflows or agents that can do human work for you at a
Yeah.
really high intelligence, which is tied to the earlier insights piece. And so a simple one is, how do we build a sales knowledge base, your source of truth based on your top reps conversation, right? We have an agent called that, the knowledge base AI employee. Boom. It goes in and does weeks of work in a few seconds. So that's
It's amazing.
one. We have over 50 of those that are going to
Okay.
get released publicly over the next year. So really, I think that um, there's so much more automation that is now going to help sales teams be a lot more productive. I think that, on the top of funnel side of things, companies like Clay, like Unify, Cargo have been doing such an amazing job at, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. On the bottom of funnel, I'm not really seeing anyone innovate outside of ourselves. And this is where we're really having our right to win.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, because there's something about pipeline. Obviously, the more the merrier. But you got to be able to convert it as well, right? So then there's lots of things. So yeah, sell me on the space because I've been in it for the last 5 years. So um, awesome, man. So yeah, like anything else you want to share or anything that I forgot to ask regarding like AI and sales or
Yeah, I think okay. So this is maybe outside of the core, concept of attention and more around top of funnel. One of the things that, I realized was, um, when you're capturing these intent signals, right? You could use that to go outbound, right? But there's even something better that you can do, which we built internally at Attention, which is figuring out who's the best person to make you an introduction to that person and speak highly of your product. Because yeah, you could outbound, you might not be the winner in the deal, especially if they already, 80% of the buyers kind of have a very strong idea of what they want to buy, right? I've seen this quite a few times where, someone will come into, our inbound router and say, hey, yeah, I've been hearing so much about you guys. I want to check you guys out. But the guy already knew, he's been posting about, one of the incumbents forever, and he's a big fanboy of that incumbent. And so we already knew that he was going to buy the incumbent, but he just wanted to check us out, right? And that was okay. We did not win that deal. However, if we had figured out a way for, a lot of people would say, you have to check out Attention because it's the best thing since sliced bread. This is how we're using it. The person's going to buy immediately, right? And so we built, an agent internally that, you put in the LinkedIn profile of the person in a Slack channel, and then it tells you all of your advisors, investors, and like champions who are connected to that person, and then all that you can do is reach out to them and say, hey, do you really know this potential buyer, because I see you guys connected on LinkedIn. And guess what, maybe one or two will say, yes, I actually know them very well.
This is awesome because it's actually a product that we're kind of building also. So I would be really interested on having a separate meeting on how you build it, because there's some challenges there. But yeah, that's amazing. Like also one of the campaigns that we see performing very well for our earlier stage customers is really leveraging their investors network. Like we scrape their connections, or we just get the connections from their investors, run it against ICP, and then we reach out with a very simple campaign, and it gets insane reply rates. Like this is a secret I didn't want to share until next year, but since you shared yours, I might as well share one as well.
Nice.
But yeah, this is like a way to get like first results fairly quick. So I think this is awesome, and this scales infinitely, right? But how many of those do you have like an actual data around the percentage of people that actually know people? Because salespeople, they add a lot of people on LinkedIn.
I don't have data, but it is surprisingly good, right?
Yeah.
Very simply, we had a deal with a massive company, and we put in, the CRO, the VP of sales, like a few people into that Slack channel, and we realized that we had a good amount of, investors and advisors connected to them. So I reached out to the first person, right, that came out of the list, Steve Smallage, and I tell him, hey, do you know the CRO of this company? It's like, yes, we've known each other for, over 20 years, great friend. Amazing. I didn't even have to rest. And he reached out immediately, and that was extremely helpful. And so every time we do this, we surprisingly find out that quite a few people are connected with who we need to be connected with, and they are very helpful.
Yeah, this is an amazing hack, so to say. I mean, very well orchestrated as well. If you automated all that efficiently, that's epic. Amazing. So yeah, without further ado, I mean, maybe to end, what would be your 3 biggest learnings now that you're a couple of years into running 100% B2B sales as a second-time founder? What are like your 3 biggest learnings and focus points for this year?
Yeah, look, I would say, it's pretty interesting. This has been top of mind for me for the past months or so, or even year. But Brian Halligan, the CEO of HubSpot, tweeted it a few days ago, which I think is very much on point. He says that the best, and fastest growing startups have CEOs who are 100% in office, have homegrown leaders, work 80-hour weeks. And D, I forgot the last one, but I really think that you need to hire for slope over intercept, meaning that you try to bring in scrappy people who are perhaps more junior, but can grow very quickly and learn very fast. And you try to avoid managers who can be, like corporate bureaucrats, right? And I know a lot of people will hate me for saying this, but I actually credit Bill Magnuson, the CEO of Braze, who I met at a speak that he gave last week. And I asked him, hey, how do you avoid hiring corporate bureaucrats that you're talking about? And he said, look, just hire extremely hungry people who are maybe a little more junior, but who have very strong ambitions, right? And so also Eric Lyman at Ramp, the CEO of Ramp, says your best managers will actually be your top individual contributors who will end up being player coaches. This is kind of like how you want to do it. You always have to get people who are maybe scrappier and more junior, but want to get their hands dirty. So if someone tells me, hey, look, I wanna be able to work remotely every now and then. I know that's some fucking bullshit for going on an island and working a couple hours and closing your computer afterwards. You just want to make sure that you want to hire people who are willing to grind 80-hour weeks. And if you don't want to do it, that if they don't want to do it, then they can just go to other companies that are allowing it, right? But as a
Yeah.
startup, to grow and survive and be the best, to just have people who are fully dialed in.
Yeah, 100%. But I guess you don't explicitly say 80-hour weeks, or you do.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the CEO of Airbnb was saying this also at this week with a conversation with Kiefer Boyce. He was saying that what he does at interviews is that he anti-sells the job as much as he can, right? He makes it sound like something that is really painful to go through. And as he anti-sells the job, at the end, he asks the candidate, if you had an offer today, is there any reason why you wouldn't take the job? And then see what they respond with, right? And I think that gave me a ton of, understanding of whether people were the right fit or not. Either people would be, hey, this is the dream for me. I'm willing to go through pain because I want to get to this level or want to be a founder one day or want to get here. And I know that, given the understanding of the world that I have, this is what I have to go through. And so, yeah, that's really kind of what you have to do. Obviously, I have other people in the team who will at some point sell the role, or also I'll say, look, it's going to be extremely painful, but you know what? You're going to get to this point. You're going to learn with the founders. You're going to have the highest slope that you've ever had in your life, but this is going to be extremely intense. Are you down with this?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I will also use that. Yeah, because I've been looking for a way like to how to figure out, and like I make the hiring experience incredibly painful for them, but not on purpose. I'm like, it's always fun, but I make them do like multiple tests, but I don't tell them there's multiple tests. I tell them there's one test, and then I tell them there's another one, and here's another one. And I see them, most of them, like giving up after the first one, or they like find an excuse, and then I just know, okay, it requires more effort because you need to speak to more people, have more channel. But anyway, yeah, so very cool. Amazing learning. Anything else before we round up?
I think we're good. I think this has been a pretty solid hour
Yeah.
conversation. I think a lot of people will pick up hopefully good things out of this. And yeah, sorry if I did not give out more
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Right, yeah.
No, I think it's insightful for many people. I hope. Please let us know, everyone listening right now. I think I'll put your blog article on the 10 mistakes that you wouldn't repeat in the thing. Where can people find you? LinkedIn, Twitter, website?
Totally. Add me on LinkedIn, add me on Twitter or X. And he's Bennaceur on LinkedIn. When it comes to also the blog, there's a few other learnings that I wrote about over there. So yeah, totally. I think it's a pretty good source of learning, even though I don't update it that much. And yeah, when people add me on LinkedIn, please don't send me a note or please don't try to, cold pitch slap me immediately. But yeah, if we're connected and I see your content and I see what your services and I see that this is potentially interesting, then I could be open to a conversation.
Just give the man some time to unfreeze. He's in New York after all, right? So gotta let him warm up. Nurture it, nurture it. No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Anis. This has been great. Really appreciate it, and see you on the next one.
See ya. Bye.